There's a moment you've probably watched happen. Someone raises their voice, sharper and faster, pulling hard for a reaction, and the INTJ across from them just stops. No comeback, no defense. Just a level stare and a silence that somehow fills the entire room. Most people read that as shutting down, as coldness, as the emotional wall everyone says these men hide behind. It isn't. What you're watching is a decision, a calculated, deliberate move that this man made before the argument even started. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that silence is doing, why it works on the most difficult personalities alive, what it costs the man who uses it, and how to tell the difference between silence that protects and silence that quietly destroys. Every family has one. Every workplace has one. The man who says almost nothing during conflict and yet somehow ends up being the person everyone circles back to once the noise dies down. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't raise his voice. When someone comes at him, he takes a slow breath and looks at them like he's reading a page, not fighting a battle. Then he goes quiet. And the other person gets louder and louder and eventually runs out of road. This is one of the most misunderstood behaviors in personality psychology. Bill Eddy, a lawyer and therapist who founded the High Conflict Institute, spent decades studying what he calls high conflict personalities. People whose entire pattern runs on blame, all or nothing thinking, and a constant need for a target. His central finding is almost uncomfortably simple. These people don't run on logic. They run on response. We're going to walk through 7 reasons the INTJ mind arrives at silence as a strategy, and why it works when almost nothing else does. Let's start with the one that surprises almost everyone. Silence isn't the absence of a response. For the INTJ, it is the response. Here's the mechanism. Eddy describes high conflict behavior as a cycle that needs input to keep running. The blame lands, the target reacts, the reaction becomes new evidence, and the whole thing spins another rotation. Every defense you offer is more material. Every clarification is a new thread to pull. The conflict was never about being right. It runs on engagement. So the INTJ does something deeply counterintuitive. He stops supplying the fuel. He gives the cycle nothing left to convert into more conflict. Eddy's own recommendation to the professionals he trains points the same direction. Keep the response brief, informative, friendly, and firm, and then stop. Not because the other person deserves less, but because length itself is an opening. The longer the reply, the more surface area there is to attack. The INTJ tends to arrive at that conclusion on his own, usually years before anyone hands him the research. And if you've ever watched a man in your life go completely still while someone tried to provoke him, understand what you actually saw. Not weakness. Not surrender. A man who calculated that the fastest way to end something was to refuse to feed it. But knowing that silence works is one thing. Understanding what's happening inside his head while he holds it, that's where this gets fascinating. The INTJ isn't blank in that silence. He is running the entire conversation at speed. Carl Jung described a cognitive function he called introverted intuition. A mind that processes information by pulling it inward, building a model, then running that model forward to see where it lands. In the INTJ, that function sits in the driver's seat. Paired with extroverted thinking, the drive to organize the outside world into something logical and workable. Put those two together and you get a very specific behavior under stress. Before he speaks, he wants to know where the sentence goes. Not just how it sounds right now, but where it ends up 3 moves from here. That takes time. And when the person across from him escalates every 4 seconds, there is no time. So he holds what looks like nothing from the outside is a man refusing to say something he hasn't finished thinking. Now here's where it gets more complicated, because this is the part even these men often get wrong about themselves. Not all silence is strategic, and the line between the two kinds is thinner than most INTJs want to admit. John Gottman, who spent over 40 years studying couples inside his research lab, identified stonewalling as one of the 4 behaviors most predictive of a relationship ending. Stonewalling is shutting down and going unresponsive. Gottman found it's usually driven by something physiological he called flooding, where the heart rate climbs past roughly 100 beats a minute and the thinking brain effectively drops offline. Here's the distinction that matters. Tactical silence is chosen while the man is still regulated. He could speak, and he is deciding not to. Stonewalling is silence that happens because he can't. They look identical from the outside. They are completely different events. And an INTJ who never checks which one he's actually in will eventually use a tool built for hostile people on someone who was only trying to reach him. And this next one, almost everyone standing in the room gets it wrong. To the people watching, the silence rarely reads as strategy. It reads as a verdict. There's a well-documented pattern in social psychology where we fill ambiguous behavior with our own worst assumption. When someone gives us no signal at all, we don't experience neutrality. We experience whatever we already fear. Add the flat expression most INTJs default to under pressure, and that blank space gets filled in with contempt, arrogance, or dismissal. The irony here is heavy. He went quiet specifically to avoid saying something damaging. And the silence itself gets received as the most damaging thing he could have done. And here's what makes it worse. High conflict personalities are unusually good at reading that gap and narrating it out loud for everyone else. See, he doesn't even care. He thinks he's above this. The silence gets a caption written over it by the one person in the room least interested in being fair. So if there's a man in your life whose quiet feels like a judgment on you, it's worth considering that it may not be about you at all. It may be him working very hard not to make things worse. If you're the kind of person who actually thinks about the men in your life, not just what they do, but what's running underneath it, and you're still watching this far in, that tells me something about you. It would mean a lot if you hit subscribe. We put out videos like this every week. Real psychology, explained in a way that actually makes sense. Now, here's the part that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. The strategy works. That is exactly the problem. Psychologists call this reinforcement. When a behavior reliably produces relief, the brain files it as the default and reaches for it faster every time. Silence ends the confrontation. The relief is immediate. And immediate relief is the most powerful teacher the human nervous system has. So the tool starts generalizing. It was built for the coworker who twists every sentence, for the relative who needs a villain at every dinner. But the nervous system doesn't sort by category. It sorts by discomfort. And eventually that same silence shows up with a partner who asked a fair question. A friend who was genuinely worried. A child who just wanted an answer. This is the cost almost nobody names out loud. The defense that saved him from the difficult people slowly starts running on the safe ones too. And it's expensive in a second way most people never see. Holding a deliberate silence while someone is actively attacking you is not restful. Research on self-control describes it as a finite resource, something that drains with use. He looks calm. Internally, he is spending something. Which is why so many of these men are completely wiped out after a conversation where, as far as anyone else could tell, they barely said a word. But this is the root underneath all of it. Nobody arrives at this strategy in a boardroom. He arrives at it as a kid. Developmental psychology has a way of describing this. The coping strategies we form in childhood aren't really chosen. They're selected. Whatever reliably reduced the threat is what gets kept. And for a boy with a fast, precise, deeply internal mind, one lesson usually lands early. Explaining made it worse. Being right made it worse. The adult who was already angry did not become less angry because his logic happened to be correct. So he learned the only reliable variable he could actually control. Not their behavior, not the outcome, his own output. That's the origin. Not a technique he read about somewhere. A survival adaptation from a house or a hallway or a classroom where speaking cost him more than staying quiet ever did. And this is why it's so hard to simply talk him out of it. You're not arguing with a preference. You're arguing with the single thing that reliably worked when he was 9 years old and had no other options available to him. Which brings us to the last one, and honestly, the most important. Silence isn't the strength, choosing it is. Jung's concept of integration is the difference between a trait that runs you and a trait you can actually operate. An unintegrated defense fires automatically. Same response, every situation, no assessment at all. An integrated one behaves like a tool. Picked up when it fits, put down when it doesn't. The mature version of this looks very specific. he can still tell the difference between someone attacking him and someone reaching for him. He can hold his silence with a high conflict person for a full hour and then turn to someone he loves and say, "I'm not shutting you out. I just need 20 minutes before I answer that." Same pause. Completely different message. And that one sentence is the entire difference between a man who protects his peace and a man who accidentally builds a wall around it. So the next time you see a man go quiet in the middle of something loud, you know what you might actually be looking at? Not a wall, not indifference. A mind that learned early that words thrown into a fire only make it taller. Someone who found the one lever that consistently worked and has been pulling it ever since. Sometimes exactly when he should. Sometimes on people who never deserved it. The silence was never the absence of feeling. It was the presence of a decision. And the men who learn when to set it down are the ones who finally get to be understood as well as protected. If this one landed, I put together a video on the INTJ mind and why it gets so consistently misread. It's right here whenever you're ready.